Hello, everyone, and thank you again for joining us tonight. So again, thank you for coming to our webinar on transforming our finances during a pandemic. This is the third in a series of 4 that we have covered so far. And next week will be the fourth and last one. So make sure that you do attend that one, okay? Please, next slide. So before I begin with the workshop, I do want to go ahead and talk about accessibility over Zoom. As you can see here, we want to make sure that you are using Zoom on a laptop or on a computer. Now, again, an iPad, and an iPhone, or any mobile device of that nature will not give you the maximum access. So we want to make sure that you use a computer. Again, we also want to remind everyone that your sound is on so that you can hear the interpreters. We do have voice interpretation available and at the ready. Again, we also want to remind you to turn on the captions if you would like to use them. There's a button to toggle them available there. And again, if you have any technical difficulties, any issues with the captions, with the sound, or accessing the interpretation, please do feel free to reach out to us through the chat, and we will have tech support available to support you. Now, in order to see the screen best and maximize your visibility here, we want to make sure that you resize your screen to fit your needs. That way you will have a full view of my presentation. Additionally, we want to make sure that you have the most up-to-date version of Zoom so that you can have maximum access, resize your screen as you see fit and need. Next slide, please. Now, if you have questions, we do have a Q&A section available, and you can direct your questions there. If you would like to make comments, or if you have any questions about the tech needs, please go ahead and use the chat box for this. So we have 2 separate places where you can direct those. Again, we do encourage you to make use of them. Now, again, if you have any questions that you would like to be answered, again, place those in the Q&A box, and you have those available so that we can maximize your interaction and dialogue. Next slide. So we are ready to proceed with my workshop. I'd like to go ahead and introduce myself. My name is Alex A. Jones, and I am the founder and coach of ASL Coach Strategy Partners. That's my DBA. And I work with people who really want to take hold of their finances and improve upon them, specifically working to attain their goals, to reduce any personal debt that they may have, as well as to improve their cash flow. And last week or 2 weeks ago, I actually explained the role that I have and the difference between a CPA as well as a certified financial planner. So I wanted to detail the differences so that you know what a coach does and their responsibilities, as well as what a planner does, which I can also supply more information about that later. Please feel free to visit our Facebook page at ASL Coach, as well as contacting me through email, alex.jones1848@gmail.com. I'll repeat that for you. It's alex.jones1848@gmail.com. Please feel free to reach out at any moment. Next slide. Before getting into the thick of my presentation, this workshop is supported by the Wells Fargo Foundation. We are very thankful for their financial support and sponsorship. Now, we are aware that the pandemic really had a detrimental effect on the year 2020. So this is an opportunity for all of us to support individuals about their financial situation by providing more knowledge and access and education. And we are partnering with CSD Learns. And so I wanted to take the moment to honor the collaboration between both organizations here. Thank you. Today's presentation is on January 27th, that is today, and we'll be focusing on financial decision making. And in the prior workshops that we had, which took place on the 20th and the 13th, we also covered other topics, and we have one more coming up on the 3rd. Today, our workshop will be focusing on summarizing all the concepts that we have presented so far, specifically about behavioral economics and the intersection between psychology, science, and economics, and how all of these disciplines meld together in order to analyze our cognitive function and how they influence our decision makings when it comes to finances and how people behave, as well as the decisions that they make. So we want to figure out where they diverge and where they intersect. Last week's workshop specifically went into detail about behavioral economics and that concept and how it applies today, and how these apply and influence our personal financial decision making, because I feel like it's such an interesting concept where they both intersect. Next slide, please. As I explained before too, we talked about what I have detailed here on this slide. And again, we all make decisions when it comes to purchases that we make, such as purchasing a car, purchasing a new house, making the decision to invest in stocks, in banks, and other investments available to us. We also decide the type of life we want to have, specifically when we come to a life partner. And so we study the decisions that we make. And also, I want to discuss how oftentimes when we make financial decisions, they might not be the ones that are in our best interest. We also talked about how we go to stores and how we want to make sure that we are aware of the different marketing strategies that are used within stores, for example, when sales happen, right? And so we want to make sure that we are making the best purchase for ourselves when it comes to price comparisons. And oftentimes we find ourselves spending a lot of mental capacity around these decisions. So again, we want to talk about the opportunity to purchase the best price. For example, when you buy chocolate, or if you'd like to buy a Starbucks drink, right? We oftentimes make these decisions in a rush. We decide to stop at Starbucks and pick up a cup of coffee and swipe our cards, compared to the price that it takes to make a cup of coffee at home. So we have to think about these things, as well as the difference between buying a used or a new car, right? And especially if we finance it from the dealer compared to maybe putting down a payment for it, we have to calculate the costs that are involved. Let's say that we want to move to a different state for different opportunities, or perhaps we want to stay local for a job. These are all decisions that we have to make. Again, we took into comparison pursuing higher education, whether it's up to a PhD or anywhere below that, as well as whether a job requires these types of degrees. Now, again, all of these are different decisions that can definitely amass and provide and cause decision fatigue around them. So in my presentation, I will be following along with this PowerPoint and looking at my notes so that I can make sure that I'm on track with everything that I want to teach. Next slide, please. Remember last week, we did talk about a variety of vocabulary words and terminology that behavioral economics use in their research. We talked about the concept of self-hoarding. We also talked about loss and a variety of other terminology. I wanted to talk about two systems, specifically two thinking systems that our brain uses in order to make decisions, whether it's a spontaneous decision or another one that another type of decision making that reforms our thinking. So again, let's go ahead and take this moment to review these types of systems. The first system is the automatic system. And now this is specifically in our brain. It's in a specific area in our brain. And it deals with information that we already have, experiences that we have gone through in the past, things that are familiar to us. Or perhaps it also deals with the thinking process, things that we're sure of, things that we buy with certainty, that we know we will need. Now, the purpose of this automatic system, it specifically is tied with the psychology of decision making. The purpose, again, is to make decisions that we think about based on prior experiences. And so we analyze both the spontaneity of that as well as a decision that we mold over in our head to make sure that we're making the best decision for ourselves. Whether one requires a lot of consideration or one is done effortlessly and on the spot, this is a part of the brain that's activated when we go into these processes. Now, the automatic system is one. Here is the next one, the reflective system. Now, this is a slow thinking method, and it uses deliberate effort in order to go through it. Now, when it pertains to your financial thinking process, like buying a house, buying a car, or perhaps meeting a new friend or a partner, this is a type of thinking that we enable. It allows us to reflect and make a decision that best fits our needs, as well as a decision that will meet the need for our future, right? So this is what we use to kind of stratify the different levels of thinking and to take a decision that is impacted and provides results for us. So I did talk about this last week. We did talk about last week of loss aversion, right? Of not wanting to lose something, right? We want to always continuously gain, right? And so we get excited about that gain, but also end up spending a considerable amount of mental capacity and energy on personal losses that we've experienced. We tend to obsess over this. And so it actually goes through a similar process. The same place of your brain gets activated when we think of loss aversion and the decision-making process and being reflective about making these processes. So it gets activated within the reflective system of thinking. And both of these, again, impact our financial process. Next slide, please.
So this is a really interesting concept as we move forward. And before I go on, I actually really want to provide you an example of what I'm talking about. Right here in this index card, what I do have written down here is based on my own reading and my own research that I have done previously. I have figured out exactly how my own personal finances, as well as my business finances, have started to actually pick up and how you manage those. And it's that resiliency that we use, and we use that concept of resiliency and make sure that these are controlled. They are not controlling you, you are controlling them. You're making sure that your cash flow is coming in and how that impacts your business and your personal finances. And just start to think about that. How are you working towards that? And think about that carefully. How are you controlling it? And again, doing it slowly and becoming self-aware. There's just a lot of rules of thumb to follow. There's accounting procedures as well that you can follow, and just general life expectations and rules that also impact this reflective part of your brain. You're exercising that muscle. You're thinking about these finances and how they apply, and you're actually using them with that reflective part of your brain, such as a CPA, a certified financial planner, any sort of financial coaches or advisors. Let's say like planning for retirement. How do you reduce your personal debt? As well, there's just a myriad of things that you could possibly do. And there's also outliers as well, things that you have no control over that are outside of yourself. So make sure you're keeping a note of those as well. There's also that outer piece, as I mentioned, and also the interior piece of things that you have control over and exactly how we're thinking about them and how we process these decisions. So that's the difference between this sort of exterior thinking versus this interior sort of game that we play. And we put these in an interior plan. And by interior, I mean what you have control over again, and we consider that and how that plays into our finances. Next slide, please. And as I mentioned, this inner game. Okay. For example, this inner game, as I keep bringing up, how do we make these financial decisions? How do we even progress to that level? How does we change our behaviors or curb certain behaviors? And how do we come to this idea of partnership? You can also possibly hire a certified financial planner to help you plan for your retirement. Let's say in 2035 or even in 2040, look towards the future and what your trajectory is for that time. Look at the algorithms. There's different ways that you can factor this in. You're making essentially a web, a chart to also analyze what it is. Okay, if my cash flow seems off, you can talk to your planner to also figure out why. So also financial advisors, similar to a certified financial planner, a CFP, also a financial coach, much like myself, and I will be signing coach this way for this series. It also impacts your emotional mindset. It impacts your financial experiences and what you've also experienced before. There's sort of also a therapeutic sort of financial counselor that's also available to you if you so choose. So they analyze your financial behaviors. I just really want to be clear that these are all different professionals that you can possibly hire. And as I mentioned, there's also therapists as well as therapeutic financial counselors. They help with financial management and they're also certified. Even, again, as I mentioned, professional therapists, you can do that because taking care of your mental health is important. Typically, people forget that that's important and how it also marries into your financial health as well. So if I had a CPA, I mean, that's a really good job. And they're also important people to count on as well. Moving on, we have mental accounting. Back in the day, if you worked in a department or any sort of in academia, let's say the chair of your department would grant you a budget. And you would have to then manage that budget for your entire department. And as a supervisor, you then have to sort of check the books and see what you can expend. This is for faculty salaries. This is what's allotted for professional development. And you're really changing the allotments based on the budget that you have at hand. And you're apportioning that out. Many of these people that work in that sector typically have the idea, well, if I can do that, how does this apply to my personal life? Let's say you're paying any sort of regular bills or a mortgage, possibly rent. It's the same concept. You're paying also possibly vacations, retirement. And it's what's still at the forefront of your mind. Think of it like you have different buckets that you then have to pay into, but you only have so much to spread so thin. Which means that there's a maximum amount that you can spend, but that can be positive. That can be a positive thing. A lot of people often think that that's negative, that they're working with a specific budget, but that's not true. Possibly their parents might have given them some money. Let's say you might have even won the lottery or possibly a bonus from your own job. People typically like to go right out and spend that money right away. Even if you are working hard for your own salary or you're becoming somewhat miserly by saving, again, it's all depending on the fungible principle. And by that, I mean goods and assets are interchangeable. Regardless if it is a lottery or your parents did sort of give you any type of funds, this budget that you have, regardless of how you got it, these are the funds that you have to work with. And the fungible principle means that they are interchangeable, meaning that the assets are the same. So the money, again, regardless of how you got it, is still the money that you're working with. Also, it's important that you have a good game plan. As I mentioned in the previous slide, we then work with finances, again, financial coaches, financial advisors, certified financial planners. You can work with these professionals to help you plan for your retirement in the future. Also to probably reduce your personal debt and making sure that you're not making the same mistakes that you probably might have made in the past. You're avoiding those mistakes from happening again in the future. Let's say your cash flow stopped coming in, your unemployment just got dropped, your SSI got cut. There's a bunch of different reasons why your cash flow can be interrupted. Also, be aware of our own cognitive biases in terms of our financial decision making. You have to be aware of what you uniquely as a person have in your own cognitive biases. And as I mentioned in the past 2 workshops, both last week and the week prior, people typically aren't excited about this. And as I mentioned, people get obsessed about the losses and about cost. And so if something doesn't come out well, something doesn't pan out to the way the person has planned it, let's say they invest and they have a loss, they'll typically invest more in order to recoup those funds. We obsess over the negative, we obsess over the losses. Regardless if you're buying a house or if you're selling a house after you've lived there for 20 years or you've owned it for 20 years. Let's say you've sold it for $150,000. A person might make you an offer for like something less than that, and you might feel offended. You're like, well, I've lived here for so long. I think that, the price of this house should be much higher than what you've initially offered me. But again, an offer has been made. Why do we always sort of obsess over the negative and the loss? And you have to also consider the fund cost in general. Okay, moving on. Also, there's different apps and spreadsheets to help you track your cash flow. They formulate that for you and help you compute it. Okay, next slide, please. Interestingly enough, another way to avoid this sort of cognitive load or your cognitive bias and this cognitive fatigue that I always keep mentioning in these past series, you can have everything just be automated. You can have everything direct deposited directly from your own job, directly into your bank account. There's no additional deductions or anything. It is directly from your current job and place of employment to your bank account. And you can use that fund for anything that you decide to do, any of those funds for vacation or whatever you see fit. You can use it for your savings. You also have retirement contributions. Don't forget, if you do have a 401k, that you are contributing to that. If there is let's say a college fund or you're saving, make sure you're matching with those contributions for your retirement fund. Also, you might have an IRA, an IRA. And if everything is automated, you don't even have to look at it. You set it once and it's done. You can have it set quarterly. You can also have it set per paycheck. You also can do investments as well as payments. You can do it from your credit card. Everything comes out automatically. That way you don't have to consider it or think about it again. Also, you can also set reminders in these apps. I'm trying to remember what app it was. Oh, for me, I love actually reading books, just personally, me as a person. And so typically I have to figure out if I read something, let's say if I'm working on a project, how many times I was like, oh, okay, this is a really interesting topic. How many times actually would I use this topic? So also most of the apps, most of them have free trials. So you can use these free trials for 7 days, just see if you get a feel for it, if you like it. And if you do so want to keep it on, you can pay for the actual app. But again, I'm writing them down and I'm keeping that in a spreadsheet of the apps I'm testing and I use. And if I don't like them, I sort of cancel them out. I cancel the subscription and I put a check mark in my sheet, my little Excel sheet, and I keep it moving. It also it helps us impact in a different way of our cognitive decisions. Okay, next slide, please. Another really interesting thing. Oh, actually, I have an article that I'm going to be posting a quote from an economist. They researched, I believe it's about attention and people's attention spans. Give me just a moment. Okay. Okay. So it's a wealth of information creates a poverty sort of stricken attention span. And what that means is these apps, such as articles and everything else, they set these reminders and it says, hey, are you interested in these articles? Tell your friends, post it on Facebook. Posting pictures on Instagram. We're getting a barrage of constant reminders day in and day out that require a lot of our mental load and a lot of our cognition, a lot of our attention span. So we have a lot of these apps and a myriad of places that are competing for our attention. We have to limit the distractions in our lives and limit where the information that we're getting hit by every day. So you're making thousands of decisions as soon as you wake up. You're brushing your teeth, you're taking a shower, you're figuring out what you're going to wear for the day. What shoes am I going to wear? Let's say you're checking an app. Oh, the weather app. Let's say, oh, it's 30 degrees outside. And I guess I then have to change my clothes, what I'm going to wear. I'm going to dress warmly. Again, you're changing your shoes depending on the weather again, after you've already made a previous decision. And then that's not even considering the fact that we all have smartphones and we're getting pinged every moment of our day. That's exhausting. So, and then you factor in financial decisions. Oh, you're done. That's already too much. So you're getting that every day. And that's that constant stream of information. Next slide, please. And this, I'm talking about our tendency to trust. And by trust, I mean trusting ourselves. How do we make better financial decisions? Do we decide to move? Do we stay in where we're living? Do we buy a new car? Do we lease a used car? Do we hire a CPA? Do we hire a certified financial planner? Have we been planning for our retirement? Do I have enough cash flow? Should I hire that financial coach? These are all decisions, and our tendency to trust ourselves impact those. For me, I think our thoughts and our judgments, I like to triple check, not even double. I like to triple and also make sure, like, even myself as a professional, I might hire professionals. Am I making the right decision? My current self and my future self, is my future self going to thank me? Let's say when I'm 65, what does that situation look like? Where do I envision myself in the future? And how can my current self impact my future self? Would my future self at 65 still be working, or are they already set for retirement? And I hold the results and I hold that decision based on what I do now. And again, the biases, the cognitive biases that we all have just as people, we can't help it. Every day we're facing so many decisions as they're thrust upon us, and we're making them in the moment. And again, we're human. We have to accept that that's just the nature of being a person. And what we think, and remember, really tell ourselves to slow down. That's the process. Next slide, please.
Leading up to this point, we did talk about the inner game, and now we're going to be discussing the outer game. Now, this has to do with our behavior, specifically where our cognitive thinking occurs. Whether we decide to work with a professional to help us really think about and project our futures, or perhaps we may have an insurmountable amount of debt there that we have to take care of. And we want to improve our savings. However, we might have 18% of credit card debt interest that's added to us that we also have to deal with, and that's impacting our savings. So it's interesting how that affects our decision making and our behavior. So I want to make a distinction between both of these, the inner and the outer game. Now, this outer game I think is pretty cool. Now, we do understand that our decisions impact our finances, in fact. So we have to figure out that we are appropriately protecting ourselves so that we can protect our cash flow and we can improve upon our savings, as well as ameliorating the control on them, how we manage our life. We'll talk about this in the next slide. So this is about ratios, which is actually one of the courses that I offer and a concept that I emphasize being familiar with. And I apply this to myself and specifically on how I make decisions and figure out what percentage to allocate for what, whether it's debt, whether it's spending, whether it's my mortgage. All of these have to do with ratios. And so we have to share the cost between all of these, and we have to be preemptive about them. For example, there's a certain percentage that I spend on mortgage, another percentage that I spend on my finances. So there, when we take this into consideration, we know that there are certain things we have to avoid and certain things that we can take on. And so this is when our inner and our outer game come together and they mesh. Now, again, I want to emphasize that it's important to know your numbers. Now you have to know your net worth as well as your cash flow, right? For example, when we plan for retirement, the amount of cash that we have, these are all positives, right? So when we think of liabilities, these are amounts of money that we are storing away, whether it's for debt or whether it's for something else. Right now, cash flow, that's an aggregate amount of all the positive assets that we have. So you want to make sure that these outweigh the liabilities that we have. And this is how we figure out our net worth. Now, additionally, cash flow is important. You want to have money coming in. You might have monthly supplies or monthly deficits, surpluses. You might have monthly surpluses or deficits. So it's important to manage and budget your money accordingly so that you have comfortable room to breathe and you can manage your finances without running into a financial emergency. This has to do with cash flow, how much money I'm bringing in every month, as well as how much money is going out monthly. So these are just a representation of your behaviors and how you behave based on your net worth, liabilities, and your budget, your surplus. For example, remember that we have our mental accounting concept that I talked about and how we set up different pots for where we will draw our money from and where we will allocate, right? So some of these can be our, this would be what our budget consists of, right? Now, again, I want to talk about surplus. Let's say that we have a certain amount of money coming in, and every day we take some out, and at the end, whatever's left over becomes our surplus. However, if you have zero at the end after you receive that money, it means that you're in a deficit. So your goal is to amass this money, and at least if you break even, then that means that that's what you have left at the end of the day. This is your remainder. However, if you spend more than you're bringing in, then it means that you will not have enough to keep up with your daily expenses. For example, this includes rent, your phone bill. All of these are numbers, and these are constant. These are things that you pay monthly. You also have expenses like clothing and food, and these can be a little bit more variable. So we have fixed expenses as well as variable expenses. And when we consider our cash flow, this helps us allocate our money and employ that mental accounting. Now, I have a question for you. What is your liquidity ratio story? Now, this has a huge impact, especially this year that we saw it this last year. For example, this has to do with our everyday living expenses. We may feel really blessed and feel like we're impenetrable. Nothing could happen to us. There's no way that we would ever be defeated. And then we realize that there's a pandemic. We're all ordered to stay at home. The economy is plummeting. And so oftentimes our decisions are influenced by this. We feel like we're in a state of permanence and this impacts it. So it's our individual responsibility to be able to persist, carry on, and survive without a cash flow. And we should have at the ready an emergency fund for at least 3 or 6 months so that we have this money to cover the expenses. Some people only have about 1 month of expenses or even 2 weeks saved up. And so let's say that someone were to experience employment loss, or maybe their car broke down, or they don't have enough money to survive just for their basic needs. Now, this has to do with the best practice really would be to save anywhere from 3 to 6 months worth of expenses, just as a safety precaution, so that gives you enough time to look for a job, to recover your physical health so that you are prepared and ready. You would have to include your rent and any expenses that you have, you'd want to total them and multiply that by 3 to 6 months. Now, this is the amount of money you want to set aside, to leave it, to not touch it, not withdraw it. And at the moment that you should need it, you can draw from there monthly in order to support yourself. For example, you can file for unemployment. You can look for better economic opportunities to improve your situation, and this money will be there to support you until you get to that level. So again, I remind you, 3 to 6 months. It's the best practice. And this is, again, practicing your ratios that I talked about before. Next slide, please. Now, again, why is calculation important? Why does it matter? It will determine whether you are financially healthy, as well as prepare you for any incidental events that may happen. For example, job loss or any emergency that can come up. Again, I remind you, it's a 3 to 6 month allocation of expenses to be aware of. Also, you want to make sure that you are measuring how you will meet these expectations. You want to have a precise measurement of the financial services that you have and anything that you may expect in terms of needing funds for. For example, credit card. Maybe you have a loan for your car that you have to pay off. So this is not to inspire pity, but it's more to be prepared preemptively for what's to come in the future. So again, we use this ratio to calculate. Also, calculation is important. Let's say that you have a house and you're paying a monthly mortgage or rent, or maybe there's a personal debt attached to them. So there's a maximum amount of money that you can spend in your budget. This is where calculation comes in. You want to make sure that this is based on the amount of debt that you have, that you can afford it. And I actually want to provide an example here. Let me just locate it. I have an example for you. So now there are best practices that are recommended in terms of the amount of personal debt that one should be less than 30%. If you were to have a $10,000 credit card bill, you want to figure out how much of that is your maximum use. Now, you don't want to max out your credit card again. You have to set a limit for yourself, because that's where we get into trouble. This is where you calculate. You calculate what 30% of that credit card limit is, and that's the amount that you would spend. Now, you want to also prepare for this and have money allocated every month to pay off that debt on the day that it's due. Now, 35% of your payment history, the amount you want to survey how much you have there. You also want to allocate you also want to look into a historical of your spending as well, to make sure that you are only allocating 30% of this. Right, and this is where percentages are really important and calculation matters again. Now, if your behavior is impacted by your finances and you're not paying on time that 30% of money that you allowed yourself to spend on credit card, then you go into a burden, right? And so it is again affecting your mental cognition, and it reduces your cognitive ability. Another example, in terms of your credit history, it's important to have 50% of it open so that you can use it. It's 10 to 50%. Now, if you have a 30% debt, and this is all based on your behavior, then it's important that it's offset by the money that you're allocating yourself, that 15%. Now, this is what I was explaining before. Let's say we're talking about housing. Why do you think affordable housing matters? Now, research shows us that the biggest financial burden, yes, there's medical bills, of course, but housing is also a big part. I actually own a few properties myself, and what I often notice is that the biggest part of my check goes to rent, it goes to the mortgage. And the average American actually pays a lot of money for their mortgage. So what they're left with is just a minimal amount. So really the healthy amount would be to have 30% allocated for rent and mortgage. Now, if it's over 30%, then that means that you can seriously endure a considerable amount of financial burden. Now, if you are in the 30% or less range, you want to figure out the amount of money that's allocated for rent, calculate that alongside your income, and then you can divide so that you have an appropriate amount left over from your income and you're able to afford your rent. And sometimes we can't help it. The market and the rising cost of houses really does make that decision for us, as well as how values are increasing. We also have to think, can I afford this rent? Can I afford this mortgage on a monthly basis? And I think this is part of the best advice that we can give to people, how to calculate their budget based on housing. Next slide, please. And how do we control our debt? Now, if you were to look at your FICO score through a bank, we would have to say that the rule is that your debt to income ratio should be 30% or lower. And this is a general use that we go by, general rule that we go by. Yes, again, 30% or lower is the debt to income ratio that you want. So any money that you have left over, you can use for savings, for investments, to buy a family experience. Perhaps you'd like to travel, right? So you want to keep your debt low, 30% or lower. Now, I do often think about financial decisions, how we behave, and how this has to do with numbers and calculations. It's important that we know our numbers because, again, this reduces our mental fatigue, our biases, and we have room left over to really use that reflective part of our brain to make decisions about buying a car and other things of that sort.
Okay, and on this slide, we also have the healthy ratio about why should we measure. Again, we have debt to income ratio that, as I previously mentioned, and again, keep that under 30%. And next to that, we have the housing ratio, also under 30%. And moving forward, we also have, again, keeping the debt payments to disposable income. That ratio needs to be under 10%. So typically you're like, why are these figures important? Why is it important that we know these specific numbers in relation to ourselves? Because you want to know how much is coming in opposed to how much is going out. Let's say again, your mortgage or any other sort of expenses that you've incurred. Because they can see everything on your credit score. And they can decide if you're applying for a loan for buy a house or a car, the bank can decide that you're too much of a high risk and they will not lend you the funds. And that's not great. You don't want to be considered high risk when it comes to banks, considering your credit score. And we do that based on our ratios. That's how they can figure if we're sort of safe to lend to or not. So when you are working with banks, you want to make sure that you're controlling your own numbers first before you then apply for any sort of assistance or loans. It also helps you, reduce the burden and the cognitive fatigue on yourself. If you're always concerned about finances every day of your life, that's exhausting. Okay, next slide, please. Yes, track everything. Organize everything, organize your tax documents safely, keep them all in a folder, make sure they're all nice and ready for when you have to file your taxes. Keep everything possibly in a sort of Rolodex. Let's say you want to buy a new house or something, you have those tax documents completely ready and you can just hand them to the bank. You also have your income statements. For example, in 2015 and on, you're keeping them also for 2015, 2016, and you notice in 2017, your income sort of dipped. But in 2019, later on, your income sort of spiked. Why is that? It provides you a good understanding of your economic behaviors for each year prior to where you are now. It's also better for your personal safety, like keeping your social security number safe, exactly knowing where everything is so none of your personal documents or personal PII get lost. Moving on, any sensitive information, again, that has your PII, personal identification information, that PII, make sure you're shredding it appropriately. Let's say like car insurance. Say you buy a new car and you buy it in cash. What do you do with the insurance and the liability insurance that you just bought? Or even, do you even buy liability insurance? Or do you buy full coverage? Do you buy a used car? Do you buy a new car? How does the insurance factor into that purchase? You think is full coverage enough for that? Okay, well, if I buy a used car, I can then sort of justify me paying for full coverage insurance because it's a used car and I already got it at a reduced rate. But if you're buying full coverage for a new car, can you afford that? Also, life insurance. As of the pandemic with COVID-19, it's made us a lot more aware of our own mortality. People are like, well, I don't really need to do anything else. I mean, as long as I just have life insurance, or maybe I don't even need it. But now, as we're becoming more acutely aware, since the pandemic started, a lot more people are buying life insurance. And as I mentioned, track everything. It's a pain, absolutely, 100%, but it is worth it. Again, keep all your receipts. It helps you figure out what you're spending your money on. My wife, she's a perfect example. She keeps everything, all of the receipts, and she files them away. It also helps her balance her checkbook. How much money we have in the bank versus what the bank has in theirs versus what we have. She balances the checkbook based on the receipts. So it is a true match. There's nothing off. And if we do catch something that might be off, it's sometimes the bank's error. And so us keeping these receipts helps us protect ourselves. Again, I want to reiterate, it is a pain, absolutely, but it's better in the long run. Next slide, please. Okay, this is the wrap up. So either you're in control of your finances or you're not. I hate to be blunt, but it's true. Let's say like houses and cars and even in business. You're hacking your thinking. Let's say you're buying a new car. I think what was it last week? And I think on Sunday, I was reading the newspaper and you see the car listings and it's like, guess what? Here, buy these used new cars. And also because people got their stimulus checks. It was right at the top. And it said that in the newspaper. It said, since you got your stimulus check, use it for this car. Seriously? Wow. Businesses are going to find a way to make sure that they're going to squeeze every last drop of extra funds that you possibly have out of you. So it's important to become savvy with your own numbers, as I've mentioned. And again, reclaim at least some semblance of control over your own finances and know your limits. And as I've mentioned, COVID-19 and the entire pandemic has absolutely uprooted our entire way of life, but there is an upside. I know it's hard to believe, but there is. It's challenging, absolutely, and a lot of really unfortunate and devastating things have happened. This impact has obviously taken a toll on many of us. But if we really go back and start to analyze, like for me, every day I would go to the bookstore and I would buy books. Every day I would charge it to my card and I wouldn't think anything of it. So I ended up getting this really thick receipt because I love reading. I love books. I'm a bibliophile, so I bought all of these books, but due to COVID-19, it really, really had me second guessing what I was spending my money on. Again, I already have a bookshelves full of books, and it really helped me rein in my own thinking and my sort of extraneous spending. And it helps you really become more aware of your cognitive load as well as what you're spending your money on. Also, becoming more deliberate, making a deliberate effort just to regain control of your own financial decision making and your well-being. Next slide, please. I have some resources for you to help you sort of get on track with me and to continue on. There's two TED Talks of two people that I absolutely adore. We have Dan Ariely. I bought his book in 2009. He's a behavior economist. And he studies the economics of behavior and thinking and how we make decisions. And that's Dan's whole wheelhouse. And I believe that was in 2009 when he published his book. So it's a really, really good video. It's entitled How to Change Your Behavior for the Better. It helps you make better decisions, and it really helps the sort of learning that I've been talking about. Also, we also have the video by Wendy De La Rosa, and she's just done a great job. And it's about improving your psychological tricks in order to help you save some money. It really helps you sort of hack your thinking, as I've mentioned. Some tricks and tips in order to help you save. So both these resources are absolutely a wealth of knowledge. Next slide, please. Okay. All right, the time has come. We're at the Q&A portion. So I'm going to look at the Q&As and I'm going to make sure I'm going to respond from there. Give me one moment. Looking at the first question. The question is, do you know about Dave Ramsey books? Yes, yes, yes. I love Dave Ramsey. He has phenomenal books. He believes in paying everything in cash. Absolutely outright. He doesn't believe in debt. He doesn't believe in credit cards. And it's such a good foundational resource to even begin this journey. Let me tell you a little bit about my approach. At least, again, remember, I'm big about behavior economics. I'm really looking at our financial decision processes that we do. And you can see the rules of the game. You can see the suggestions and how we actually can implement those to make better decisions for ourselves financially. And it's based on behavioral sciences. And that's what it's based and led on. So it really helps us get to the human component of the way of thinking behind that. And Dave Ramsey has great books. And to really answer your question, I do have them and I am aware of Dave. Next question. Okay, this is a great question. Question number 2. How much can someone save for emergencies? How do you save for emergencies? Is it best every 2 weeks when a person gets the paycheck? Or what average amount can someone save for an entire month, possibly, for any incidental emergencies that might arise? Also, a great question. It would depend on your household. What's your budget look like? What's your mortgage? What's your rent? Do you have any auto loans? Do you have credit cards? Are you paying those monthly? You're really taking all of those things, all of those expenses, and we're calculating by 3 months to 6 months, and that'll give you your answer. And you can say the total of this times 3 months, for example, let's say $5,000, meaning you need to have $5,000 worth of emergency funds saved. If you don't have that, you open a savings account. And then you actually call that account my savings fund, my emergency fund. And every time you get paid every 2 weeks, you can then deposit into that. And it, again, depends on your cash flow. Are you then paying into that once you get paid every 2 weeks? Let's say you're sort of finagling your budget and you're putting $150 away per paycheck. And then you're actually squirreling away all of that money just little by little until you hit your $5,000 amount. And then you're set. You're set for the minimum amount that you need for the 3 to 6 months to just exist. And then you keep that, again, I want to be very deliberate that these are separate. You can have a savings account and also an emergency account. Though this is not mutually exclusive. You can have 2 separate ones, and I suggest that you do. You have one for an emergency account just in case your cash flow is interrupted and stops. So let's say even if you do bi-weekly as you're getting paid $100 per check, you keep just moving that into your emergency fund until you hit the requisite amount that you need to survive if your cash flow ceases. Other question. Good question. What are some ways we can reduce the housing cost burden? Bad news. Really bad news. If you really calculate rent or mortgage any of those payments, divided by the gross income that you possibly have. If it's over 30% of what you make, you might need to get a partner. You can have these discussions and talk with each other about how much you really want to invest in that to really lower that percentage. Let's say, are you even looking at a 2-bedroom apartment? You might need a roommate. It is what it is. Once your lease is up, possibly you can move into a more affordable apartment or some type of more affordable housing. I know it's not ideal, but again, you're also considering the cost of inflation every year. The costs do go up. You have to be considerate of that. Also, even selling a house and your own particular individual financial situation. You can also, again, employ a financial planner, an advisor to help you discuss this. However, if you make these big decisions, you have to decide, can you afford that? Can you afford that house? Can you afford that apartment? Even the one you're currently in, or do you have to move to something more affordable? Is it worth it for you to possibly move in with your partner or to get a roommate? Like for me and my wife, we discussed it based on percentages per person between her and I. And we paid into that and to make sure that we were set. And it took care of every household bill that we had. And every month we do it half and half. We split everything. And it wasn't 30% over our annual income or what we call our household budget. And it's a tough decision. It really is. And we also had to reduce our own expenses. We lived in an apartment, or if we were considering possibly even moving to another house or anything else, we really took every opportunity to reduce the burden ourselves. Next question. This is an interesting question. So the question is, so no more than 30% towards housing. How would you recommend to allocate towards business expenses for these people who are operating their own businesses? Good question. Really good question. It's interesting. I don't have a formula in front of me for that sort of specific thinking process. But for example, I own rental properties here in Rochester, New York. And I have specific percentages of operation costs. For example, mortgages, insurance, anything else that's specific to my rental properties. I then move some of those funds to an emergency fund. Let's say someone decides to tent in my yard or something. There's a problem with my rental properties, or something is a problem with the roof. If we have a leaky roof, I have an emergency fund for each individual separate rental property. That's also just what a business owner, what that looks like and what business expenses look like. And you're actually saving that in case of an incidental emergency. You want to make sure that you have enough to cover anything that might happen. Again, like what happened with COVID-19, the closure of all businesses. You then have to figure out, do you even have enough resources? Do you have enough funds to last 3, 4, 5, 6 months or longer? Okay, yeah, I think that was the questions. I think that's all of them. Wait. Yeah, no, this is what I already answered. Sorry, we seem to be out of time. Again, I want to keep us on track. Next slide, please. I'll see you all next Wednesday, 7 o'clock. And this one's gonna be super exciting as it is our workshop series finale. So please come on through, bring your friends, tell everyone, and I'll see you all next week at 7 p.m. We're using the same link as we have for every previous session. So that's next Wednesday. Next slide, please. Also, thank you so much for joining us this evening. And again, a big thank you to the Wells Fargo Foundation for sponsoring this workshop. And again, thank you to CSD for this incredibly important and timely topic. Remember to contact me, alex.jones1848 at gmail.com. Thank you so much and good night.